Hello and welcome to Close to Walk Catholic Communications. I'm Father Bayer, your host. We're glad that you can join us today. Today is a very different opportunity. It's not often that I have the opportunity to meet with people who, in my estimation, have somehow, by the grace of God, been put into the most significant moments of the church in the last 60 years, starting with the Second Vatican Council, the election of 6 different popes, the idea of the falling of the Berlin Wall, everything that involves. It's one of these Forrest Gump people. These Forrest Gump people who God has used to put him in a position to be part of the most important parts of church history. And so it's a great pleasure to welcome Msgr. Hilary Franco.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here.
Msgr, it's, I think you're a living library. I know. When it comes to church history, you're one of these people that God has chosen to be in the middle of it all. Some kid from the Bronx,
yes,
who, son of immigrants, and now God has used you in an incredible way. And so, aside from being the angel of the Blackboard and the personal assistant for many years to the late, great Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen, tell me about, let's start with the council and tell me the role that you played and how you were part of all that.
Allow me to use the young, at that time, relatively young lady that you were a chaplain to. Her name was, I think, was Teresa of Calcutta.
Oh.
One day, I was with her because I had so much, you were a chaplain, you know what I mean. And at one point, there was a pen there. She says, can this pen write by itself? I said, Mother, how can write by itself? You have to use it, see?
That Bronx attitude, but anyway, go ahead.
We should, because you had to be tough, she was a tough lady with me, and vice versa. She used to come at the end of the Mass, that I would say for the sisters who are at the headquarters there at every Saturday at San Gregorio. She would always stay in the back. Then at the end, she would come to the sacristy and kiss my hand, and then she would go on with her comments on my homilies, So going back to the pen, she said, if we are the pen in the hands of God, He can do marvelous things with us. But if we can think that we can do everything by ourselves, the pen cannot write by itself, but in the hands of God can do it. So back to your gracious, introduction of my work, I always felt that my priesthood would always keep me in touch with the people of God. I was ordained when I was relatively very young, I would say.
22 years old.
And I always wanted to be in a parish, but by the providence of God, we had to be that pen in the hands of God. And so He put me in situations that I had not expected to be put in. Let me put it that way, at the beginning of my priesthood. And then I tried to follow whatever was the will of God and doing whatever. And one of the things, was the council, when I think I should mention, how one day I met my icon. That was Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen. I mean, at that time was only bishop. And then I am in a parish in the Bronx. They had sent me there, called Our Lady of Mount Carmel. It was a big parish at that time. Now,
who you're named after, by the way.
That is correct.
Carmine.
Carmine.
Sure.
And I was born actually on the day of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. So I had read every line that he had written, not like Communism and Conscience of the West. And I had taken notes, I had my own questions. I call up, I figured the National Office of Propagation would be, he was the national director, someone would answer. And sure enough, Edith Brownette, number one secretary, answered the phone. And she said, yes, in those days, there was the peak of the popularity of Fulton J. Sheen. Heads of state would have to wait a long time in order to be having a few 5 minutes, with the bishop. And so I said, I'm a priest of the Diocese of New York, and I have some questions with Bishop Sheen. You think it's possible to see him? So Edith Brownette later on, God rest her soul, she said that I did not know what to do. I said, well, I have to ask the bishop. All right. So there I am waiting on the public phone. In those days we had no time. And after a few minutes, she comes back. She said, how about 3:30 tomorrow afternoon? Fine. I figured it was normal. It was not normal. And by the way, she said, 15 minutes, that's all. Oh, okay. Got on that elevated throne, we used to call it the L,
The L train.
Come down, whatever, come down, and 366 Fifth Avenue. Eventually, that would be my office later on, and I'm ushered in the Bishop Sheen on television. He looked so powerful, so tall. He comes around, to greet me around the kind of where he was sitting there, and it was kind of relatively short. It did not make it. To make a long story short, I had my notes, and I said, well, Bishop, and here he is, the famous Bishop Sheen, responding to me in monosyllables, kind of. At one point, he said, well, what's going on? But what happened was that those 15 minutes became 43 minutes. 43 minutes.
With Fulton Sheen.
Yeah, with Fulton Sheen. And he's there looking at me with those piercing eyes. Then at the end, he gets up. He gets the latest book, The Life of Christ. And he writes, well, what's your name? I said, Father Franco. As a tribute to a good and learned priest, with cordial esteem, fraternally, Fulton J. Sheen. Naturally, I still cherish the book. Am I right?
Sure.
So and then I figured, well, I had not even read what he wrote, and then I was ready to leave. And she said, what are you doing tomorrow for lunch? I said, today was my day off. This is a big parish with 9 priests, there. I have to ask the pastor, all right, ask 1230, 109 East 38th Street tomorrow. I said, okay, thank you, Bishop. So I kissed his hand, and I went away. I go to my pastor. The pastor was the first Italian-American bishop, Pietro Pernicone, in the United States. So 9 priests, and I went to him and I said, Bishop, I would like to ask permission to have lunch tomorrow with Bishop. Well, he was a holy man, but he got so mad. He said, young man, sit down. And here I sat down, and he said, remember, I know that you already have a doctorate, and but remember, never lie to your superiors. I made an examination of conscience. I had not really lied to my superiors. And I said, well, you lunch with Bishop Sheen. I see Bishop Sheen only when we have these official dinners, and that's it. You are going to have lunch with Bishop. You could have asked me to go out for lunch. And in my naivete, I said, okay, can I go out for lunch? Okay. So later on, he told me that for a long time he didn't believe me, but I got on that I had to find 109 instead of 8th Street, and then he comes. What's his name? The Frederick comes to open the door. He brings me down, and who's sitting there but Salvador Dali and his wife?
Salvador Dali.
I think I said probably 10 words during that lunch because they were so brilliant. He was so brilliant. His wife was as brilliant as he was, and naturally Bishop Sheen. Here I am, the kid. I said, we come up to say hello to the good Lord all the time, to say goodbye, and the two guests say goodbye, and then I'm ready to say goodbye to the bishop. He said, well, do you mind to stay with me another 10 minutes? The bishop. What would you say, Father? Yeah, of course. Naturally. He sits down, and he said, the Holy Father. I'm answering your question. It was important that you know how. And he said, well, the Holy Father, John the 23rd, has named me a member of several commissions in the anti-preparatory commissions for the Second Vatican Council. Remember, the Pope had, decided to have the council on the 25th of January 1959. Remember, he had been elected on the 28th of October 1958.
It's incredible. You remember this is incredible.
It's incredible. So, and here is, he is the Pope. This is 59, and here's the Bishop Sheen. He said, well, do you think that you can help me? Bishop Fulton J. Sheen, my icon, is asking me to help him. He said, well, we can. I said, of course, Bishop, anything I can do. And that was the beginning of how I really got involved with Fulton J. Sheen. Then I became his an assistant, as we said. Officially, the title was Assistant to Bishop Fulton J. Sheen, And then, naturally, I was the Peritus for him and the American bishops. The American bishops had a problem, had a big problem. In those days, the council was, there was only one language.
Latin.
No simultaneous translation. Latin, that's it. That was it. So each bishop, each father of the council, 2,625 fathers were allowed to speak for 10 minutes. Now, the Italians and the Spanish, they know Latin fluent in Latin, so they would go on and on.
They don't know what 10 minutes is.
The 10 minutes. And I remember, one of the he was German, Cardinal Duffner. He was one of the presidents of the council, and at one point he would say, "Tempus tuum exhaustum est, valeas concludere." Your time is up. You have to conclude. I hope they would have the same thing at the United Nations.
UN,
they don't have it. They don't have. And if they would not conclude, he would immediately announce the next speaker. Audiamus excellentissimo reverendissimo dom. So that's the American bishops, unfortunately or fortunately, very few knew about the Latin language.
Stay with that. We'll be right back in a moment. Stay with us. Thank you. Hi, I'm Father Jeff Baye from Closer Walk Catholic Communications. Thank you for being here today, and a special thanks for the support that you give us. First of all, your prayerful support we so desperately need, and also your financial support. We are donor-driven, and that is what keeps us on the air today. As you well know, the truth is in great demand and in very short supply, and mainstream media is not going to bring you the truth of the Gospels of our Lord Jesus Christ because that's not socially acceptable and it's not politically correct. Certainly we all realize that when this life journey's over, we don't stand before the Supreme Court, we stand before the throne of God. Therefore, with great clarity and great charity, to pronounce the truth of the gospel is important. Your prayers, your financial support enables us to do that. So we thank you, and may God bring you closer in your walk with the Lord each day. God bless you. Hello, and welcome back to Close Walk Catholic Communications. So glad you came back to join us. We're with an incredible guest, Msgr. Hilary Franco, who's just brought us up to his involvement in the Second Vatican Council. And with that, we are going to move on from there to talk about how this put him in relationship with the Church Universal. Monsignor, welcome back.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for having me here.
So you were at the council,
Yeah.
and consequently, you became an official in Rome, worked in the Vatican 26 years?
Yes. Not immediately, because we had to go back, to, as you do know, the council started on the 11th of, this is really, everybody knows this, October 11th, 1962, and we concluded on the 8th of December, 1965. So naturally, after this, we had to go back, to our normal routine and so on and so forth. And then we had an audience with Bishop Sheen. I was present at that beautiful audience, so much so that I still have the rosary that St. Paul VI gave me on that occasion. And the bishop, the popes had always asked the bishop, since you have done so much for the church, I think we should do something for you. And that time, the 13th of May, 1930, I have to remember dates, because of 1966. He asked, said, well, Your Holiness, since you are so gracious, I would like to have my own people. And so later on, I found out from the apostolic delegate in Washington, who later on would become my boss, because I would be there for 2 years, the details. And he was named a bishop at that time. Rochester was such a beautiful, beautiful diocese, with St. Bernard Seminary being very famous at that time in the United States. So everything was perfect. And that was the first opening the diocese after our audience with the Holy Father. So he was named. And I have a picture here to prove it, when he was...
installed?
Yes, he was not installed. When he was actually, Cardinal Spellman gave the announcement to all the press people that were there at 452 Madison Avenue. And I have also my picture here with the Cardinal and the Bishop at that moment when he announces, By the way, you will see a lot of hair on my head, the bishop becomes Bishop of Rochester. I went to Rochester with him for a month, and then Archbishop Maguire, justly so, he called me up and he said, Hilary, that's not your diocese, so you will receive a letter. And I was so happy when I received the letter that I would be back. I was sent to a parish, Our Lady of Victory in Mount Vernon. I enjoyed it. I had even those, unfortunately, I stayed there only a few months because of what happened. I was named the secretary of the apostolic delegation in Washington, so I was there for 2 years. And then from there I was called to Rome to start the English desk. This is really interesting. At that time, the English-speaking countries would not really deal that much with Rome. It's interesting. Immediately after the council, there was some kind of almost awakening of the English-speaking world, especially with John Joseph Wright being such a head of such an important dicastery at that time, the congregation. So what happened was that I'll never forget that Monsignor Baudes was kind of handling some of those things. But he said, I said, I'm sure that you know the English language. I said, Msgr Baudes, who was Hungarian. He said, Giovanotto, young man. He said, why do I have to know English? I said, English speaking, kind of. And he looked at me and he said, Guarda, and I still have it. Everything, it's a form. They usually need the rescripts. And what's the name of your diocese? I said, New York. You write Neo Boracensi, and that's it. I said, but I'm sure that you visited one of the English-speaking countries. He looked at me again. He said, Giovanotto, young man. He said, after the revolution in my country in 1956, I arrived here in Rome as a refugee. I've been working here in the Vatican, and the farthest that I have gone was Frascati.
Oh, wow.
So there
20
was
miles
no
outside of
knowledge of the English. That goes to show you. And what happened was that then I realized that I had to start from scratch. And now there are 2 or 3 people taking care of what I did for all those years, 26 years. Because in those days, we priests believed in obedience.
Yeah.
I had told my friend Terry Cook, I said, I'll go to Rome, but only for 2 years because I want to go back to a parish life. He said, okay. When I came back, from my vacation after 2 years, said, it's not up to me anymore. You're in another world, and that was the end of it. So, and that's that was. I had many missions.
Very close to Pope John Paul II.
Yes, I was. We were very good friends with John Paul II because when he arrived as a young auxiliary bishop of Krakow at the council, I was a priest of the council. We became friends. And we did a lot of things together, not knowing that who would ever think that a Polish Pope, up until that time, we had always, and we kept until one day there was Cardinal Pericle Felici, I'm in the square with thousands and thousands of people. Yeah, the white smoke, I go there, and Pericle Felici says, Habemus Papam, Carolum, as he said immediately, Carolum means Charles. And I said that the only Carolum is Confalonieri because there were only Italians up until that time. And he's 85 years old. I can't be. I mean, they elected the Pope so old. And sure enough, then he said, Wojtyła. I said, oh my, up until yesterday, I called him
Carol.
Now I have to call him Your Holiness. And that was, we continued, we did a lot of things. We helped a lot in that eventually will happen in '89, the fall of the Berlin Wall. President Reagan was our great friend. I can tell you one thing about President Reagan. They came once in the Vatican only for one day. Actually, he arrived in the morning to discuss with the Holy Father and with us. That was really the moment when eventually the whole thing would be concluded well, And I'll never forget that the Italian president at that time got mad because, the president, he said, he went from by helicopter from the airport to our heliport in the Vatican. So he went to another state because the Vatican is a different state, as you do know. But he insisted. So I said, all right, in order to avoid problems, because he was leaving again back to the United States at the 7 p.m. So he went to lunch. And here's my friend Nancy. Nancy said, Monsignor, how am I going to do it? Because usually with the Pope, you're always dressed white, except the queens, the Catholic queens. They have the privilege of wearing white in front of the Pope. That's interesting.
Wow.
And so the Queen of Belgium, the Queen of Spain, and so on and so forth. So, but the others have all to wear black. She said, what am I going to do? I can't go to my embassy in Italy because I would go to another country. So you think you can find a room for me to change to go for the lunch? I said, I'll try it. There are only 11,000 rooms to the Vatican. And I did. When she came out, because it was a beautiful room, we had frescoes from Raphael, and those guys. And I said, and she said, Monsignor, I'm not going back to the White House. But that was one of the many things just to share with you.
White House looked pretty shabby compared.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
One of the many things that we did with John Paul II.
And you did a lot of diplomatic work with them as well.
Yes, we did.
Such as?
I the hot summer of 1980, there was the question of Solidarność.
Yeah.
Marcinkus was part of it.
Marcinkus, yeah.
And kind of commuting between Warsaw and Moscow, but we succeeded in so many things, I don't know. My friend Ted Schultz, who wrote a biography of
John Paul.
Of John Paul, Pope John Paul II. And he mentions this. I don't know. I just quote him. I can't say what really, kind of. Late in August 1980, John Paul II wrote a private letter to the Soviet Communist Party General Secretary, Brezhnev. The first of at least two such missives, assuring him that the unrest in Poland was no threat to the Soviet Union. The letter, this is, I'm quoting
Schultz.
Right, Schultz. So that's important. The letter was hand-carried to Moscow by Monsignor, an American who's a senior official in the Congregation of the Clergy. Items of secret correspondence between the Vatican and the Soviet. Monsignor Franco will not specifically confirm that he had carried letters from the Pope to Brezhnev, and that on each occasion he had to wait a number of days for replies. But he acknowledges being in Moscow in August 1980, quoting, jogging along the Kremlin to while away the time,
Monsignor, we're not going to ask you to reveal anything you shouldn't. Thank you.
Thank you
for being a faithful son of Holy Mother Church.
Thank you so much.
God bless you, and thank you for being with us each day. May each day bring you closer in your walk with the Lord. God bless.